Family, there are moments in life when you don't see a way forward. The door is closed. The money is low. The doctor's report isn't good. The relationship is strained. The opportunity dried up. And you're standing there asking, Lord, what now? But here's what you must understand. When you can't see a way, God doesn't need your visibility to create his pathway. He is not limited by your perspective. He is not restricted by your resources. He is not confined by your circumstances. When the children of Israel stood in front of the Red Sea, they saw water. They saw impossibility. They saw defeat. But God saw a highway. See, we focus on the obstacle. God focuses on the outcome. You may be looking at a Red Sea, but heaven is preparing a miracle. You may be looking at a lion's den, but God is arranging a testimony. You may be staring at a grave, but resurrection power is already scheduled. God specializes in making ways where there are none. But here's the key. He doesn't just make a way. He makes his way. And sometimes his way is not the quick way. Sometimes it's not the comfortable way. Sometimes it's not the way you would have chosen. Because before God changes your situation, he often changes you. He uses pressure to build perseverance. He uses delay to build dependence. He uses adversity to build authority. So when you're in a tight place, don't panic. Position yourself. Praise before you see it. Pray when you don't feel it. Stand when it's uncomfortable. Trust when it doesn't make sense. Because faith is not believing God can. Faith is knowing God will in his time and in his way. You may not see the blueprint, but he is the architect. You may not understand the timing, but he is never late. You may not know how, but he always knows how. The same God who made a way through water, the same God who shut the mouths of lions, the same God who rolled away the stone is the same God working in your situation right now. So lift your head, strengthen your heart, anchor your faith, because this is not the end of your story. When man says no way, God says, watch me. And when he moves, no devil in hell, no obstacle in front of you, no circumstance around you can stop what he has ordained. God will make a way. There are moments in life when what stands in front of you looks bigger than the God you serve. Bills stack up, doors close, people walk away, opportunities disappear, the diagnosis comes back negative. The business slows down, the child goes in the wrong direction. And in those moments, the pressure of what you see begins to shrink your confidence in what God can do. But God is not limited by your circumstances. Your circumstances are real, but they are not ultimate. They may be factual, but they are not final. What you are facing may be large, but it is not larger than the one who sits on the throne. The mistake we often make is measuring God against our situation instead of measuring our situation against our God. When you look at your bank account, you see lack. When God looks at your life, he sees provision you haven't encountered yet. When you look at a closed door, you see rejection. God sees redirection. When you see delay, God sees development. When you see opposition, God sees opportunity. We serve a God who operates outside of what limits us. He is not confined by time. Because he created time, he is not restricted by resources because the earth is his and everything in it. He is not intimidated by systems, governments, markets, or medical reports. He speaks, and what did not exist begins to exist. He commands, and what was chaotic falls into order. The reason your circumstances feel so powerful is because they are visible. You can see them, you can calculate them, you can feel them. But God's power is not always immediately visible. It often works beneath the surface, behind the scenes, in ways you cannot trace with your natural eye. Think about it. Seeds grow underground before they ever break through the soil. Foundations are laid beneath the house before anyone admires the structure. God often does his greatest work in hidden places before he reveals it in public spaces. Your limitation does not intimidate God. In fact, your limitation is often the platform he uses to demonstrate his sufficiency. When you reach the end of your ability, you are finally positioned to experience the beginning of his. As long as you think you can fix it, manage it, control it, or manipulate it, you rely on your strength. But when you realize you can't handle it, that's when you lean into his unlimited capacity. We tend to panic when we see no way forward. But just because you don't see a way doesn't mean a way does not exist. It simply means the solution is beyond your current line of sight. God's vision is not restricted to your vantage point. He sees the end from the beginning. He sees connections you haven't made, resources you haven't accessed, favor you haven't encountered, people you haven't met. What feels like a setback to you may actually be divine alignment. What feels like loss may be protection. What feels like isolation may be preparation. God has a perspective that stretches beyond the moment you're trapped in. Circumstances change, markets fluctuate, people shift, health can rise and fall. Emotions can be unstable, but God does not fluctuate with your environment. He is consistent in character, steady in power, and faithful in promise. If his ability were tied to your situation, he would be unstable. But because he is sovereign, his power remains intact no matter what surrounds you. Sometimes God allows you to face situations that exceed your strength so you can discover his. If you never faced anything impossible, you would never need a miracle. If you never faced resistance, you would never develop resilience. If you never encountered uncertainty, you would never learn to trust. Your circumstances may explain where you are, but they do not dictate where you are going. They may describe your present condition, but they do not determine your final destination. God writes the last chapter, not your struggle. When you truly understand that God is not limited by your circumstances, fear begins to loosen its grip. Anxiety loses authority, despair starts to fade. You stop interpreting every obstacle as defeat and start seeing it as a stage for God's intervention. The situation may not change immediately. The pressure may still be present. The challenge may still feel heavy. But your perspective shifts, and when your perspective shifts, your posture changes. You stand differently. You pray differently. You speak differently. You endure differently because you know something the circumstance doesn't know. You know that the God who holds the universe together is holding you together. You know that the one who commands oceans and galaxies is not confused about your life. You know that no limitation around you can restrict the limitless power above you. And when you live from that understanding, you stop asking, how will this work out? And you start declaring, somehow, some way, God is already working it out. Obstacles have a way of announcing themselves loudly. They show up uninvited, unplanned, and often at the worst possible time. You're moving forward, building momentum, making progress, and suddenly something blocks your path. A door closes, a relationship first, actors, funding falls through, opposition rises, and it feels like everything has come to a grinding halt. But what if the obstacle isn't there to stop you? What if it's there to position you? We are quick to label resistance as rejection and barriers as defeat. Yet over and over again, what looks like a dead end becomes the very place where God demonstrates his power. The obstacle you're frustrated about may actually be the setup for the miracle you've been praying for. Think about how often breakthrough follows pressure. Muscles grow through resistance. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Seeds must break open before they break through. There is a pattern woven into creation itself. Strain precedes strength, and difficulty often precedes display. The problem is that when we encounter an obstacle, we focus on what it's taking from us instead of what it might be preparing within us. We see delay, God sees development. We see inconvenience, God sees intervention. God sees intervention. Obstacles force you to confront your limitations. They reveal where your confidence truly lies. When everything flows smoothly, it's easy to trust your own ability. But when you hit a wall, you discover how fragile self-reliance can be. That wall becomes an invitation to depend on something greater than yourself. Sometimes the obstacle is not just external, it's internal. Fear, doubt, pride, insecurity, impatience, and God will allow an external challenge to expose an internal weakness, not to shame you, but to strengthen you, not to condemn you, but to refine you. You see, a miracle is not just about changing your situation, it's about transforming you in the process. If God removed every obstacle instantly, you might get relief, but you would miss growth. And growth is what sustains you long after the miracle has passed. Obstacles also clarity, direction. When one door shuts firmly, it prevents you from walking into something that was never meant for you. The blockage becomes protection. The detour becomes alignment. The no becomes a setup for a better yes. But here's the tension. When you are standing in front of the obstacle, you cannot yet see the miracle. All you see is the barrier. All you feel is the pressure. And that's where faith steps in. Faith doesn't deny the obstacle. It reinterprets it. It says, this is not the end. This is the stage. The greater the obstacle, the greater the opportunity for God to reveal himself. Nobody celebrates when a small problem is solved. But when the situation is clearly beyond human capacity and then something shifts, that's when the testimony carries weight. Obstacles create contrast. And without contrast, you cannot see glory clearly. Light shines brightest in darkness. Deliverance means more when bondage was real. Provision is sweeter when lack was intense. What if the obstacle in front of you is actually positioning you for influence you could not have gained any other way? What if the struggle is building credibility? What if the resistance is strengthening endurance? What if the delay is deepening your character so that when the blessing arrives, you can sustain it? There are things you learn in valleys that you cannot learn on mountaintops. In comfort, you may celebrate God. In crisis, you come to know him. The obstacle drives you to your knees. It stretches your prayer life. It sharpens your discernment. It forces you to listen more carefully, trust more deeply, and surrender more fully. And sometimes the obstacle is public. People see it, they talk about it, they speculate, they question your calling, your competence, your credibility. But when the breakthrough comes, it is just as visible. The same stage that displayed your struggle will display God's faithfulness. The obstacle is not random. It is not wasted. It is not meaningless. Even when it is painful, even when it is confusing, it is not without purpose. There is orchestration behind what feels like chaos. There is intention behind what feels like interruption. You may feel pressed, but you are not crushed. You may feel blocked, but you are not buried. You may feel surrounded, but you are not abandoned. The obstacle is a signal that something significant is at stake. Easy paths rarely lead to extraordinary outcomes. It is the tight places that prepare you for wide spaces. It is the confrontation that prepares you for conquest. So instead of asking, why is this in my way? Consider asking, what is this preparing me for? Instead of viewing the obstacle as an enemy, begin to see it as a platform. Because when God decides to move, the very thing that looked like it would stop you becomes the evidence that he was setting you up all along. One of the greatest tensions in the life of faith is accepting that God's way is not always the way we would choose. We want clarity. He often gives direction, one step at a time. We want speed. He often works through process. We want comfort. He prioritizes character. And in that tension, frustration can begin to grow. But his way is higher than your way. That doesn't just mean it is different. It means it is superior in wisdom, perspective, and outcome. You are looking at a single chapter. He is writing the entire story. You are reacting to a moment. He is orchestrating generations. You are focused on immediate relief. He is building eternal impact. When God chooses a path for your life, it may not align with your preferences. It may stretch you beyond your comfort zone. It may require patience when you would rather move quickly. It may involve pruning when you were expecting promotion. And if you are not careful, you will misinterpret his method as neglect. But delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. Process is not punishment. We struggle because we equate God's goodness with ease. If it's smooth, we assume he is in it. If it's difficult, we question whether he has left. Yet some of the most significant growth happens in seasons that feel slow and hidden. Roots grow deeper before branches stretch wider. Foundations are reinforced before higher levels are added. God's way often includes preparation you cannot see. You may be asking for elevation while he is building endurance. You may be praying for influence while he is shaping integrity. You may be seeking visibility while he is strengthening humility. If he gave you the platform without the preparation, the weight of it could crush you. His way is higher because it accounts for factors you don't even know exist. There are dangers you cannot see. There are traps you do not recognize. There are timing elements beyond your awareness. What feels like an unnecessary detour may actually be divine protection. What feels like stagnation may actually be alignment. You see inconvenience. He sees interception. You see loss. He sees liberation. You see closed doors. He sees corridors you haven't discovered yet. Trusting that his way is higher requires surrendering control, and that is not easy. Control gives the illusion of security. It makes you feel like outcomes are tied to your effort alone. But surrender acknowledges that there is wisdom beyond yours. It says, even when I don't understand, I will trust. Understanding can wait, obedience cannot. You may not fully grasp why the path looks the way it does, but you can still take the next step, and often clarity comes after movement, not before it. There are seasons when God's way will contradict your expectations. You thought it would happen by now. You assumed it. Whoa, old come through that person you planned for it to unfold in a certain location. But God shifts the timeline, changes the players, rearranges the environment, not because he is inconsistent, but because he is intentional. His perspective is not bound by urgency. He is not rushed by your anxiety. He is not pressured by your deadlines. He works with precision, not panic. And sometimes the waiting season is where he recalibrates your heart. He removes motives that are misaligned. He reshapes desires that are immature. He refines intentions that are self-centered. If everything happened the way you initially wanted, you might settle for something smaller than what he intended. You might cling to good when he has planned great. You might accept temporary satisfaction and miss lasting significance. His way is higher because it leads you not just to achievement, but to transformation. It is not only about arriving somewhere, it is about becoming someone. And who you become determines how you handle what you receive. When you look back over your life, you will likely see moments where what felt disappointing at the time turned out to be defining. Opportunities you lost redirected you toward better ones. Relationships that ended created space for healthier ones. Delays that frustrated you developed resilience you now depend on. In real time, it is hard to celebrate the higher way. It requires faith that stretches beyond feelings. It demands confidence in his character when circumstances seem unclear. But over time, you begin to recognize a pattern. He wastes nothing. Every season, every struggle, every shift serves a purpose within a larger design. His way may be narrow at times, but it leads to expansion. It may feel restrictive, but it yields strength. When you accept that his way is higher, peace replaces panic. You stop fighting every twist in the road. You stop assuming every discomfort is a mistake. Instead, you begin to walk with quiet confidence. You trust that even when the route changes, the destination remains secure. And in that trust, you find stability, not because everything around you makes sense, but because the one guiding you does. Before provision shows up in your hands, positioning must take place in your heart. We often want God to release the breakthrough while we remain spiritually unprepared to sustain it. We ask for increase without adjusting our obedience. We pray for open doors without aligning our character. But faith is not passive anticipation. It is active alignment. Positioning is about placing yourself where God's flow can reach you. It is not about earning his favor, but about cooperating with his principles. Rain can fall everywhere, but only prepared ground produces a harvest. If the soil is hard, the seed cannot take root. If the heart is closed, the promise cannot fully mature. Too many people wait to move until they see evidence. But faith moves before the evidence appears. Faith praises before the answer comes. Faith obeys before the details are clear. Faith stands when circumstances suggest sitting down. Positioning says, I will align myself with what God has said, even if I haven't yet seen what he promised. There is a difference between waiting and preparing. Waiting can become passive. Preparing is intentional. While you are in the waiting season, positioning asks, is my mindset aligned? Are my habits aligned? Are my words aligned? Is my attitude aligned? Because sometimes the delay is not about God withholding, it is about God refining. Positioning also requires perspective. When you are under pressure, your natural instinct is to complain, withdraw, or compromise. But positioning chooses a different response. It chooses gratitude. E over grumbling. It chooses prayer over panic. It chooses integrity over impulse. That choice does not always change the external situation immediately, but it changes your internal stability. Before elevation comes humility. Before expansion comes stewardship. Before visibility comes hidden faithfulness. If you cannot be trusted with small responsibilities, larger ones become liabilities instead of blessings. So God will often test your posture in private before he promotes your platform in public. Your words are part of your positioning. If your mouth constantly contradicts what you claim to believe, you create internal conflict. Speaking defeat while praying for victory misaligns your spirit. Positioning means speaking in agreement with God's promise, even while standing in the middle of uncertainty. Not denying reality, but refusing to let reality define your expectation. Your relationships are also part of positioning. Who you listen to shapes how you think. If you surround yourself with voices of doubt, cynicism, and fear, your faith weakens. But if you align with wisdom, accountability, and encouragement, your confidence grows. Positioning may require distancing yourself from environments that drain belief and stepping into spaces that strengthen it. Obedience is central to positioning. There are times when God gives you simple instructions that feel unrelated to your bigger prayer. Forgive that person. Be generous in this season. Serve faithfully in that small assignment. Let go of that habit. Adjust that priority. And you may wonder how those steps connect to the breakthrough you desire. But obedience in small things opens doors in larger things. Provision often follows movement. When you take a step of faith, you demonstrate trust. And trust creates partnership. It shows that you are not merely interested in the outcome, but in the relationship. Positio. Ming says, I care about walking with you, not just receiving from you. There is also endurance in positioning. It is easy to start strong. It is harder to remain steady. When days turn into months and months into years, discouragement tries to settle in. But positioning maintains consistency. It keeps praying even when there is no visible shift. It keeps serving even when there is no applause. It keeps believing even when progress feels slow. Faith is not proven when everything is comfortable. It is proven when you choose alignment despite discomfort. when you hold your integrity under pressure, when you guard your heart against bitterness, when you resist shortcuts that promise quick results but compromise long-term purpose. Positioning is not glamorous. It happens in ordinary moments. It happens in daily discipline. It happens in unseen decisions, but those unseen decisions build spiritual strength. They create capacity. They prepare you to handle what you have been asking for. Sometimes people focus so heavily on the miracle that they neglect the maturity required to manage it. But God is not only interested in giving you something, He is interested in shaping you into someone stable, someone faithful, someone grounded. When your heart is aligned, your spirit is steady, and your actions are obedient, you are positioned. And when you are positioned, you do not have to chase provision anxiously. You do not have to manipulate outcomes. You stand in expectation, not desperation. Because you understand that when the time is right, what has been prepared in heaven will meet the posture you have cultivated on earth. There are moments when life feels like it has reached the final period. The diagnosis seems definitive. The failure feels permanent. The relationship appears irreparable. The opportunity looks gone for good, and the weight of it presses on your heart like the story is over. But your story isn't finished just because. You've reached a difficult chapter. We often mistake a painful season for a permanent ending. We assume that because something stopped, everything has stopped. But setbacks are not the same as conclusions. Delays are not destinies. A closed door in one season does not cancel the calling on your life. You are living in the middle of a narrative that is still being written, and the author has not run out of ink. When you focus only on the present struggle, it can distort your perception. Pain has a way of magnifying itself. It fills your vision until you cannot see beyond it. But one chapter, no matter how heavy, does not define the entire book. If you quit reading in the middle, you miss the redemption that may be just a few pages away. There are times when everything around you suggests finality. People move on. Opportunities disappear. Resources dry up. You may even hear internal whispers saying, "This is it. This is as far as you go." But feelings are not forecasts. Circumstances are not prophets. They do not have the authority to declare your end. You may have experienced failure, but you are not a failure. You may have faced rejection, but you are not rejected by God. You may have lost something valuable, but loss is not the same as destruction. Sometimes what falls apart clears the ground for something stronger to be built. Think about construction sites. Before something new rises, something old often has to be torn down. From the outside, demolition looks messy. It looks chaotic. It looks like loss. But in reality, it is preparation. The clearing is necessary for the foundation. Your disappointment may be demolition, not destruction. It is easy to celebrate stories once they are complete, but living through them is another matter. When you are in the middle, you do not see the resolution yet. You only see tension, you only feel uncertainty. But growth, though, fatten happens in unresolved spaces. Strength develops when you choose to keep moving without full clarity. There is resilience being built in you right now. There is wisdom forming in you right now. There is depth being carved into your character right now. And those qualities will matter in the next chapter more than you realize. You may look at others and assume their stories unfolded smoothly, but many of the strongest testimonies are built on seasons that felt like endings. The job loss that led to a calling, the heartbreak that led to healing, the closed door that redirected purpose. What seemed like the end was actually a pivot. When you understand that your story isn't over, hope regains its place. Hope is not naive optimism. It is confident expectation rooted in trust. It says, I do not know how this will turn, but I believe there is more ahead. That belief fuels endurance. It keeps you from surrendering to despair. Despair convinces you to stop trying. Hope strengthens you to take another step. And sometimes the next step is small. It is getting up when you would rather stay down. It is praying when you feel silent inside. It is applying again after rejection. It is forgiving when bitterness feels justified. It is believing when doubt is loud. Your current chapter may be marked by struggle, but it does not have to be marked by surrender. The one guiding your life is not surprised by your setbacks. He is not scrambling to repair a mistake. He weaves even broken threads into the design. What feels fragmented to you can still become part of something beautiful. There are promises over your life that have not yet fully unfolded. There are capacities within you that have not yet been fully expressed. There are opportunities you have not yet encountered. Just because you cannot see them does not mean they do not exist. Time has not run out. Purpose has no. Expired. Calling has not been revoked. You may be in a valley, but valleys are not permanent residences. They are passages. You walk through them, you do not build your identity in them. Mountains are still ahead. Open spaces are still ahead. Restoration is still ahead. As long as you are breathing, there is potential for new beginnings. As long as there is faith in your heart, there is room for renewal. The same power that carried you this far is capable of carrying you further. This chapter may be hard, it may test you, it may stretch you, but it does not get the final word. The final word belongs to the one who began the work in you and has every intention of completing it. Even when you cannot trace his hand, you can trust his heart. There will be seasons when God's activity in your life is unmistakable. Doors open quickly, favor flows. Prayers are answered in ways that leave no doubt. But there will also be seasons when heaven feels quiet, no clear signs, no dramatic shifts, no immediate breakthroughs. And in those moments, the silence can test you more than the struggle. We often equate movement with activity. If we don't see visible change, we assume nothing is happening, but God's greatest work is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Just because you cannot trace what he is doing does not mean he has stopped working. Think about how many processes in life are hidden. A child develops in the womb long before the world sees the baby. Roots grow beneath the soil long before branches stretch toward the sky. Foundations are poured beneath the ground before a building rises high. The most critical phases are often unseen. God does not perform for your reassurance. He works with intention, not exhibition, and sometimes he withholds visible evidence so that your faith can mature beyond sight. If you only trust when you can trace every detail, you're true. Trust is conditional, but real faith says, even when I don't understand the process, I believe in the promise. Tracing is about explanation. Trusting is about relationship. You may not understand why the answer hasn't come yet. You may not see why the door remains closed. You may not comprehend why the pressure continues, but trust anchors you when explanation is absent. It steadies you when clarity is delayed. There is a difference between confusion and abandonment. Confusion means you lack information. Abandonment means someone has left. God's silence is not his absence. It is often an invitation to deeper dependence. When you can trace every step, you tend to rely on logic. When you cannot trace it, you are forced to rely on character. And God's character is consistent. He is faithful when you are unsure. He is steady when you are shaken. He is present when you feel alone. Sometimes God intentionally disrupts your ability to calculate the outcome. He removes the predictable patterns. He shifts the familiar routines. He allows uncertainty to surround you, not to harm you, but to draw you closer. Because certainty in circumstances can replace intimacy in relationship. If you always knew how it would turn out, you would consult strategy more than prayer. You would depend on planning more than presence. But when the path is unclear, you lean in. You listen more closely. You seek more earnestly. There are blessings forming that you cannot yet perceive. There are conversations happening beyond your awareness. There are alignments taking place outside your view. Heaven's activity is not restricted to what you can observe. Just because the curtain has not been pulled back does not mean the stage is empty. Impatience tempts you to demand answers prematurely. But premature revelation can disrupt divine timing. There are things you are not ready to know yet. There are details that, if revealed too soon, could overwhelm you or alter your obedience. Trust accepts partial information without losing full confidence. You may not understand why certain relationships shifted. You may not see why opportunities were withdrawn. You may not grasp why the timeline changed, but hindsight often reveals wisdom that foresight could not detect. What once looked like misalignment becomes protection. What once felt like loss becomes redirection. When you cannot trace his hand, look at your history. Reflect on the times he carried you through what you thought would crush you. Remember the provisions that arrived when resources ran low. Recall the strength that showed up when you felt weak. Your past victories become anchors for present uncertainty. Gratitude fuels trust. When you rehearse his faithfulness, you strengthen your confidence in his future activity. You remind yourself that the God who sustained you before has not changed now. Trust does not mean you suppress questions. It means you refuse to let questions override conviction. It means you bring your uncertainty to him instead of allowing it to distance you from him. It means you choose surrender over suspicion. The path of faith is not always illuminated step by step. Sometimes it is lit just enough for the next move. And that is intentional, because faith grows in increments. Each step strengthens you for the next one. You do not need to see the entire blueprint to follow the builder. You do not need to trace every thread to trust the weaver. His ways may exceed your understanding, but they do not exceed his goodness. So when the road ahead is unclear and the details are hidden, anchor yourself in who he is, not just in what he does, not just in what he gives, but in his unchanging nature. Because even when you cannot trace his hand, you can rest in the certainty that his heart T. Onward, you remain steady, faithful, and good. Life often places you in situations where the opposition seems overwhelming. You may face rejection, criticism, betrayal, or circumstances that feel far beyond your control. You may watch opportunities pass by, doors close, and plans unravel, and it can feel as if the enemy has surrounded you on all sides. In those moments, it's easy to focus on the problem instead of the promise. It's easy to focus on what's against you instead of who is with you. But this is precisely the time to remember that no opposition can cancel what God has ordained. Your life is under the governance of a power far greater than any opposition you encounter. Circumstances, people, systems, and even setbacks cannot override divine purpose. What God has decreed will come to pass. You may face delays, detours, or difficulties, but the ultimate outcome is secure. Opposition can slow a process, but it cannot stop a plan. Trials may shape and refine, but they cannot nullify destiny. It is important to understand that opposition often serves a purpose in God's design. Just as heat purifies gold, resistance shapes character. Just as tension strengthens a bowstring, challenges build resilience. The enemy may try to intimidate, distract, or discourage, but those very attempts often position you for greater growth and deeper reliance on God. The strength you gain in the struggle becomes the testimony you will share later. The endurance you develop under pressure becomes a foundation for future victory. Faith becomes critical in these moments. Faith does not ignore opposition. It refuses to be intimidated by it. Faith recognizes that the power behind your purpose exceeds the power arrayed against you. Faith declares that your assignment, calling, and destiny are not negotiable. Opposition may roar, but the voice of God is louder. It may threaten, but his promise is steadfast. It may intimidate, but his spirit empowers. One of the ways opposition is neutralized is through perspective. When you see every challenge as a roadblock, fear takes over and your energy is consumed by worry. But when you view opposition as a temporary resistance to an eternal plan, your mindset shifts from panic to perseverance. You understand that what appears to be an obstacle is actually a stage where God's power can manifest. You see that adversity does not cancel destiny. It amplifies testimony. You recognize that resistance is not rejection, it is redirection or refinement. Preparation also plays a key role. When opposition rises, it exposes gaps in strategy, patience, or character. It forces you to rely on wisdom, discernment, and courage that may have been dormant. God uses opposition to stretch you beyond comfort, to teach you endurance, and to cultivate a dependence on Him that cannot be learned in the absence of challenge. Those who trust only in smooth paths miss the depth of maturity developed through resistance. Persistence is another weapon in the face of opposition. Many give up too soon because they see obstacles as permanent walls rather than temporary tests. But persistence keeps you moving forward even when progress is slow or unclear. It keeps your vision intact when distractions abound. It maintains faith when fear tries to speak louder than promise. The act of refusing to quit demonstrates confidence in the outcome, even before the outcome is visible. Spiritual alignment is equally critical. Opposition cannot cancel what God has ordained when your heart is positioned in obedience, prayer, and integrity. A life aligned with God's principles becomes untouchable in the sense that even when you encounter external pressure, the ultimate destiny remains secured. What the enemy intends for harm, God can turn for good. And this alignment of your spirit allows Him to do so effectively. Finally, history is your proof. Look back at every challenge you have already overcome. Every time you thought the situation was too difficult, God provided a way. Every time someone tried to stop you, doors opened. Every time the enemy sought to destroy, deliverance came. The record of His faithfulness in the past is a reliable foundation for confidence in the present. Just as He never failed before, He will not fail now. Opposition is real, but it is not ultimate. Circumstances are powerful, but they are not sovereign. Setbacks may sting, but they do not cancel destiny. When you anchor yourself in God, stand firm in faith, persist in obedience, and maintain perspective, you create an environment where opposition loses its authority. It may attempt to intimidate, delay, or discourage, but it cannot overturn the plan God has established for your life. No matter how daunting the circumstances, no matter how loud the voices against you, no matter how impossible the situation seems, the ultimate reality remains. God's purpose will prevail. Opposition can try to bend you, shake you, or even test you, but it cannot cancel what He has ordained. And when you walk with that confidence, fear loses its grip, discouragement dissipates, and every obstacle becomes a stepping stone toward the destiny that is guaranteed by the one who never fails.